Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Uh, Peace to the God.
Peace to the universe. Let's get right down to business, brother. Let me play our disclaimer.
Disclaimer, warning, the content will examine phenomena that some would find offensive, inappropriate, insensitive and triggering. This content neither suggests, nor implies, medical, or any other professional advice. This is a light-hearted discussion of a comedian and his therapist friend engaged in hypothetical conversation on black mental health and race. In no way are the following views and content associated, or affiliated, with this, or any other, platform that this podcast may be accessed. All information and opinion are independent expression of free speech that a reasonable person may freely consider adapting or opposing in their own paradigm.
Welcome back, brother, to another podcast. And to welcome back to our audience. You are listening to Black Men. Let me get this right, brother. You are listening to Black Mental Health and Race, a conversation between two black men. We try not to make it too serious, although serious topics will be discussed. Um, we try not to scare people or pressure people into any way of thinking, but to have a conversation from a critical analysis standpoint. Welcome back, Dr. Moore.
Peace.
Peace. I am your host, Doug. MF Doug, AF. Yes, sir, brother. I have earned a title before my name and a title after my name, sir. Uh, I'm one of the most achieved um, underachievers that you will ever encounter. I think we started off the conversation before we went on air about loyalty to your fraternity, your brotherhood, your gang, your clique, your crew, whatever that loyalty is to, loyalty to your education, loyalty to your job, loyalty to your marriage or relationships. How can you maintain it? And are there some people like myself who are not that loyal to anything? And what type of person is that? We'll get into that and other things. I'd like to start off, Dr. Moore, with a rest in peace to a world famous man. I think nobody that I know of the Caucasian persuasion had more influence in my eyes than Jimmy Carter. Rest in peace to former President Jimmy Carter. Any thoughts, my brother?
No, man, not really. I just remember Jimmy Carter as a kid, um, as one of the first, second presidents.
Hmm.
In my lifetime, remembering, um, but not really knowing the significance of um, him becoming president at the time.
Hmm.
Um, I just remember um, that people were saying that he was for black folks at the time. That's what I remember.
Hmm.
Um, so that's what I remember the most about Jimmy Carter as a kid.
Hmm.
But as an adult, um, obviously I've learned some other things.
Yes, sir. You care to share, brother?
No,
Was it as disappointing as Christopher Columbus?
no, I don't have anything bad to say about Jimmy Carter. I think he was he seemed to be very charitable and um, philanthropic,
Yes, sir.
um, and he seemed to have been dealt a bad hand in politics.
Yes,
So
sir.
um, so I don't have anything negative to say about Jimmy Carter. I think that based on what I understand, um, he was a good person.
Yes, sir.
He strived to be the best person he could be based on what I know.
Yeah. From a historical context, let me see if I got this right. Um, I think Richard Nixon was in office. His vice president was Spiro Agnew. Where they get these names, brother, is another thing. So when let's see, former President Richard Nixon, resigned. He was forced out of office because of the allegations that what was on the tapes. He was recording himself for his legacy of greatness, and certain things appeared on the tapes that were not befitting of the office of the President of the United States. So rather than be impeached, he resigned. But he would have probably been the first president to actually be impeached. After him came Gerald Ford. Now, I don't know why Spiro Agnew didn't, I'll have to look that up later, didn't take office since he was the vice president. Somehow Gerald Ford became President Gerald Ford. Um, and
Well,
then, go ahead.
it would make sense that the vice president of Nixon didn't run because of the catastrophe of Nixon.
Hmm,
It doesn't seem that he would have been favorable based
hmm,
on him being the vice president of someone who was viewed as so corrupt. But
exactly.
continue.
That makes a lot of sense. Anyway, Gerald Ford would take office as the president of the United States. Um, I don't even think he wanted to run for a second term because that's how we got President Jimmy Carter. Um, he was a uh, he was a self-entitled peanut farmer from Georgia. That was what Jimmy Carter was famous for. He lived to be 100. That in itself is an achievement and should be applauded. I never got the feeling from Jimmy Carter that he was being deceptive. I think he really wanted to help people. If not black people in general, he wanted to help to end poverty in America. Unfortunately, he was up against some very sharp and keen politicians on the other side of the aisle. Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, was a Democrat, and he had to fight the Republican Party for anything that he tried to do to end that poverty. After his presidency, he became one of the most notable members of the Habitat for Humanity that used to build houses for people of impoverished backgrounds. So they were trying to get people to have their first home, and I think that was his one of his themes as president. Unfortunately, he ran into political strife in international waters, and there was a hostage situation, and there was a lot of Muslim terrorist activities going on, which most American people thought that he was being too soft on, and so he would not be able to get a second term out of that type of, they, uh, as Dr. Khalid said, they call it milk toast, when the person is very passive in terms of their foreign policy. I think one of the requisites of being president is you have to kill some terrorists during your administration. Um, anyway, rest in peace to former President Jimmy Carter. I think well done, faithful servant. What did you think of all of the attendees that have to be there, um, Republican and Democrat, because of the legacy of former President Jimmy Carter? You actually even seen President Obama sitting next to the incoming president, President Donald Trump. Um, we've later found out that Michelle Obama has declined to be at the inaugural for President, the incoming president, Donald Trump. What do you think of the impact of a person like President Jimmy Carter, um, or not just necessarily him, but the fact that although we are opposed to each other in our different factions, when a situation like a funeral comes up, we seem to set aside our differences to memorialize the dead.
Oh, I don't know that that's the case. I think that they come together for political reasons. I don't know
Hmm.
that they necessarily put um, things aside, and I don't know the details of um, why George Bush Jr. Declined to shake hands with um, Donald Trump.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know how personal, that was. I mean, they're both of the same political party,
Right.
but for some reason it appears that there's not good energy between them.
Hmm.
So so all of them coming together for the bereavement of President Carter, I think was more politically inclined than anything else. I don't know that. Um, I don't know what their relationships were like with Jimmy Carter.
Yes, sir.
Um, but I think all of them coming together as past presidents was political, and I know, um, and I know just from being in organizations, um, and in the work environment, when things are done, for political reasons.
Yes, sir. It was interesting. I actually didn't notice that part because I only saw a clip, and the clip showed all of them walking in. And now that you mention it, I you see that Bush Jr. Um, did not pass by the aisle where Barack Obama and the incoming president Donald Trump was sitting. He went to the next aisle. I guess that was a seating arrangement, but I thought it was strange that he didn't shake hands, but that explains it. From what I'm told, I don't know how true it is, but They all meet backstage before they do the seating arrangements, and the picture that's displayed openly is not the picture that you see before the seating, the formal seating. Also, show you how interesting things could be. They did a lip reading between the conversation of Barack Obama and the incoming president, Donald Trump. And it said that Donald Trump was saying, no, that Barack Obama was saying, former President Barack Obama was saying, we can't talk now. I think we should be quiet for the ceremony to begin. And Donald Trump was saying, President Donald Trump coming in was saying something that wasn't coherent, but he was saying that he withdrew from that for a reason. It was interesting that what the the length that people go to see what those conversations are. Definitely interesting from a political standpoint.
Mm.
I know when you disengage, brother.
No, I'm not necessarily disengaged, but I'm just not. When you say it's interesting, um, the length that people would go to,
They get a lip reader to find out what these fools said to each other.
yeah, that I mean, that's not really surprising to me.
Hmm.
Um, because people spend all day on TikTok. So
Yes, sir.
of course, they would spend time trying to find out what the presidents were saying to one another, because that's newsworthy for
Mhm.
a lot of people.
Yes, sir. Um, Remind me, we have to get to the LA fires. You're listening to Black Mental Health and Race. Did a brief introduction um, with a tribute to Jimmy Carter. Um, we have to talk about the Los Angeles area county wildfires and the inevitability of California fires and California earthquakes. There's a lot of conspiracy theories going on. These are man-made. They even caught a black guy setting a fire. So now, uh, nice white folks want to blame this black man for setting most of the fires that went out of control, which I found interesting because California and LA, which is in the line of the Santa Monica winds, are always on fire. If you remember, Dr. Moore, there was two songs, but the one most prominent, prevalent in my head was about Public Enemies, "Burn Hollywood Burn." Um, I don't know how relevant it was, but that that was such a prominent reminder that Los Angeles and the surrounding areas and California in general has always had fires, and they have always burnt out of control because of the drought, the vegetation, and the need for um, building in those dangerous zones, like say like you're the Hollywood elite and you want to live up in Calabasas. That's where it's the famous residents, the Kardashians live. Kanye West used to live when he was married. Uh, Beverly Hills. All of these places where you don't want to live in downtown LA for whatever reason, whether it be poverty or being a celebrity. All of these surrounding areas starts to get overpopulated. And so the expansion into those danger zones became very prominent. And it's just like setting up a house at the bottom of a volcano. What will eventually happen? Not a conspiracy, not even a divine um, nature. It's just going to be a tragedy because you're living in a dangerous zone. It's just like people in the Midwest that are living in Tornado Alley. You're going to be a victim of a tornado eventually. It may take 2,000 years, but these fires that happened in California happened at least 10 times a year or more. But they're going to drag that. And I'm talking about I'm talking about the press are going to drag that into, and rightfully so. We don't want to see anybody lose their lives. Um, but you're in a danger zone. Your thoughts, Dr. Moore?
Mm. My thoughts in terms of them building in a danger zone, or just the fires.
The fires.
I don't look. I think um, the fires are a horrific thing, right?
Yes, sir.
But and I don't know a lot about the fires, but from what I understand is that they are mostly affecting people with a lot of money,
Hmm.
and so I just find it interesting that these people with a lot of money, um, who have been tragically affected by these fires, are all of a sudden asking the government about funding or um, asking for government assistance
Hmm.
for what they lost. And I just find it interesting that they want people to be um, benevolent. They want people to be empathetic and understanding when it comes to them losing what they're losing, right? But when it's homeless people and poor people,
Hmm.
asking the government for something is welfare.
Hmm.
So because I'm not um, well versed on um, everything that's happening with the wildfires. Partially is because of what I understand and who is impacting the worst.
Hmm.
Um, and so, and in me saying that, um, from what I understand, it's mostly people with a lot of money. Um, and I don't know if these are their primary homes or their second homes or whatever they are, but it's easy for me to be empathetic to anybody losing things that they love. But I find it problematic for those people not to be empathetic for other people who lose things or don't have things on an everyday basis.
Hmm. Indeed. You are listening to Black Mental Health and Race. Our theme for tonight, this is our first show, Dr. Moore, of season 5. We made it this far, brother. Um, we've had, on our last episode about United Healthcare um, killer, uh, Luigi, um, forget his last name. We had 13 plays on it. So we're not that popular, but we don't do this for popularity. We do this, actually, I think it's therapeutic for us to stay in touch, Dr. Moore, and to clear our minds. A meeting of the minds.
We do this in the name of God.
Yes, sir. We were talking about religion. I was telling you just before we came on air, that I went to a janaza, which is I hope I'm getting the pronunciation right. It's a Muslim funeral. Um, One of the members of the Nation of Islam, um, who, when I came into the mosque in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, I saw this young man. He couldn't have been no more than 13 years old. And this was also when Dr. Khalid Muhammad was sent to New York to try to expand our um, our presence in New York City, and I think he was doing a good job at it. And for some reason, the politics of him being in New York was not, according to his own words, Dr. Khalid, were not advantageous or accepted. But nevertheless, we had a funeral for Kevin Muhammad. Um, he stayed in the nation even after I departed from the nation. And I'd like to say rest in power to the brother Kevin Muhammad. Your thoughts, Dr. Moore? And our theme for tonight is firearms, stress, and poverty, a year in review. Every year that we come on the air, we do a year in review. Um, it's usually to talk about the state of the black consciousness, the state of the black unity, the state of the black uh, existence, whatever you want to call it. Um, what is our status amongst ourselves, and how do we project that to the bigger picture out into the world? What is our status? How are we seen to the rest of the world? Not that we should actually put more focus on how we're seen outwardly, but we should have more strength inwardly so that we don't have to worry about things like that. Um, Maybe having a little technical difficulty with Dr. Moore, but hopefully you can still listen and he will be
Oh,
back.
I can hear you fine, bro.
Oh, okay. What did you think about, do you remember Kevin Muhammad, the little young soldier?
Vaguely, bro. Vaguely.
Yes, sir. Do you remember when Dr. Khaled's son was in the junior FOI?
I remember that vaguely also.
Right. Well, Kevin Muhammad, even at 13 years old, it wasn't an official position, but he took it upon himself to make sure that Dr. Khaled's son was being watched and made sure that nobody was not going to trouble this young man. I think Dr. Khaled's son was about 7 to 9 years old at that time in the 90s. And Kevin Muhammad went on to stay in the nation when I departed. We were talking about loyalty, which we'll get into also. Um, you said you're still active in your organizations, and I just thought to myself, well, what the hell is wrong with me? Your thoughts on people that leave their faiths or their relationships? I left my marriage. I left my faith. I left everything. But I said, knowing something about myself through all of those experiences, I realized even my jobs that I left, I'm not a loyal person to a fault. Is there, I won't even ask you, is there a problem with that? I could tell you there's a problem with it. All of these structures and foundations that I built, I was willing to throw them away. Your thoughts, Dr. Moore?
Yeah, so it's two things that jump out in my head. Um, and they could be further examined. Um, but it sounds like you have abandonment issues and you have
Hmm.
attachment issues.
Hmm.
And so those are things that you probably want to look into because prior to us coming on, when you said that, and we were talking briefly about it, you said, well, you were asking me, was I still active in my organizations? And I said, absolutely. I'm, still involved in, you know, heavily involved in both my Masonic and my um, uh, uh, fraternity
Yes, sir.
of Omega Psi Phi. And you said, wow, I think maybe I joined the wrong fraternity. And I said, well, I don't know if it's about joining the wrong fraternity. I think it's more, you might want to examine more of the character, you
Hmm.
know, as opposed to the fraternity, because it doesn't matter what fraternity you go to, if your character isn't is in flaw, right?
Hmm.
Because you're gonna do the same thing wherever you go.
Hmm.
You're gonna show up that same way in whatever you do,
Wow.
right?
Yeah, that's
And,
deep.
right. And so instead of looking at, because now you are dis- displacing the behavior, right?
Hmm.
And you're saying, well, maybe it was that organization, and maybe if I had joined another organization, you know, where it, when you start to do that, you what you're doing is you're not acknowledging things about yourself, right?
Eh,
And so you're shifting the blame, everywhere else, but yourself.
hmm.
But the reality is, what's consistent in whether it be your marriage, whether it be your job, whether it be your organization, is you're the one consistent that's not consistent,
Hmm.
right? And so where when we talk about loyalty to a fault, right? What I know, surely I identify with loyalty to a fault, and because I've been that way in everything that I've ever been involved in, right? So whether it was the streets, whether it was my education, whether it be my kids, whether it be my marriage, I'm once I commit, I'm committed,
Hmm.
and you
Each
know,
on it, brother.
so I'm one of those people that I don't ever want to start a task that I can't complete.
Hmm.
I'm not going to start a task that I can't complete.
Hmm.
And that's from something small to something big. I don't care if it's a book that I start, you know, a degree that I start. What's interesting is just today I was doing some editing. I was asked to write one of my fraternity brothers is putting together a book, and
Hmm.
he asked me if I would. He said, "Man, I'm kind of familiar with your story. I've heard some things about your story, but I would like for you to be a contributing author to a book that I'm putting together."
Wow.
Um, and he said, he gave me a couple of examples of things that I could write about. Just do a one pager. And so the thing that from the examples that he sent me, I chose to write about the triumphs in my life,
Hmm.
right, and how you overcome them. And so I started to put together this one pager, and then I sent it to my one of my old attorneys, who's now a book author of many
Wow.
books. Um, and one of the things that her response to my one pager was her first words were, "Wow, I didn't know you struggled so much in your educational matriculation."
Hmm.
And I started off by saying, um, I started off by talking about, there's a verse in the Bible that says, "To whom much is given, much is expected." And I was talking
Yes,
about
sir.
how I was always perplexed by that, because you know, uh, being born and raised um, in poverty, and the food stamps and welfare and the projects and all that other stuff,
Yes,
I
sir.
surely was not a person that felt like I was born with much, right? Um, and so, but there was a saying that my grandmother used to have, that she would say, "Not having is not an excuse for not getting,"
Hmm.
right? And so I internalized that. And so I started off by talking about my educational my educational endeavors, or my road to my educational goals. And I started off by saying, like, I had no clue as a kid to what I wanted to be as an adult. What my ultimate goal in life was going to be. And part of that was, I just I didn't have a lot of examples of things to aspire to,
Hmm.
coming from my world. So I wasn't goal oriented, right? And so I wasn't thinking about being anything that was grand, right? I wasn't thinking about being an astronaut, being a scientist, being a doctor, a lawyer. I wasn't thinking
Right.
about any of that, because that seemed so far reaching from my world.
Hmm.
But you know, I talked about, somehow um transitioning into the underworld, um and what that had brought me. And I started to talk about um trying to leave that world but not knowing how, right? And I started to talk about the one thing, regardless of what was happening around me, I always had a passion for reading, right?
Hmm.
Um, I was always reading something from the time that I was, just a young kid. I was always reading. And so um, that reading propelled me, into reading a lot of different books by a lot of different people, including Supreme Wisdom teachings, right?
Sir.
And those teachings were motivation for me to um, better myself and believe in myself, right? And in me doing that, that um, inspired me to start to spend a significant amount of time kind of re-educating myself, with reading and writing and math and all that other stuff, to where after reading the Supreme Wisdom teachings, I started to believe that I could, do these things that I was reading about, these great accomplishments. And so, that was my motivation for applying to colleges. And so eventually, getting accepted at the age of 22 and going to college at the age of 22, where most of my peers were graduating from college at that time instead of coming into college at that time, right? And so I'm going into college. I'm writing about this, talking about my triumphs. I get into college at 22, and first semester I flunk out, right?
Wow.
And so in me flunking out my first semester, I go to my math professor and I tell him, wow, I, was really struggling in your class. I know I made an F, you know, but this also means that, I got to leave after my first semester. And, this math professor saying to me, I don't want you to flunk out and go back to wherever you came from. Because I believe that if you go back to where you came from, you might not come back. So
Right.
he said, the fact that you have come to me to ask for help, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change your grade from an F to an I, and I'm going to give you an incomplete.
Right.
And with this incomplete, it will allow you to stay in school, right?
Wow.
And so, but he said, under one condition, you have to come back and take my class and pass it, right? And so, with that, he went and changed my grade from F to an incomplete, which allowed me to stay in school, right? And so, with that, I was able to stay in school, and I'm writing about this, right? And so I get up to my junior year, right? Right. But while I'm still in school, I'm still endeavoring, with my college academics and the underworld. And so I complete my third year of school and I come home and I get arrested and I'm facing 30 years, in prison.
Wow.
Right. And so I have a choice to cop to a plea of 15 or go to trial and face 30. But by the grace of God, I go to trial and I come home, right? And then I come home and I go back and I finish that last year of school, right? And so I go back, I finish that last year of school, I graduate, I walk across the stage, right? Well, it's graduation day. One of my friends drives me to graduation because at this point I've lost everything that I've had, cars, money, everything. I don't have anything now. And so I can't even drive to graduation. I got to get a ride. So
Wow.
I get a ride to graduation from one of my friends, and I walk across the stage. There's no one there. There's no family. There's nothing. There's just me walking across the stage, and I get this degree. And then I go back to my living quarters, and I just get back in the bed and go to sleep, and I spend the rest of the day, doing that. And so that, sums up my undergraduate years of undergrad. But what I shortly learned after that is that after getting this degree, it actually opens the door and the opportunity for me to get a graduate degree, right? And so I go into my graduate program and I flunk out, right, of my graduate program. and I realized that, oh crap, what am I gonna do? So I petitioned the school
Mm-hmm.
to tell them, look, um, I've taken these classes, and and this happened, you know, what can you guys do, um, and for me in this situation? And
Mm-hmm.
the school writes me back, um, and they say, well, look, this is what we'll do. We'll give you one last chance. We will allow you to retake the last 3 classes that you took, but you have to make all A's. You have to make an A in each class, and that's the only way you're gonna pass.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way you're gonna get this master's degree. And they're telling me it's impossible, but we're gonna give you this opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so they re-enrolled me back into the school. I get into these classes, and by the grace of God, I ace every last one of these classes. I
Wow.
pass and get my master's degree.
Wow.
All right. So now, and then I start to write. So I'm writing about this, right? And then I start to write. By now, I meet my in the midst of all this, I meet my a colleague that I went to undergrad with, who becomes my wife.
Wow.
And then we have, 2 amazing, beautiful kids together. And even with this master's degree, I'm still struggling financially to take care of the kids and my wife. And so I
Mm-hmm.
enrolled, into this doctoral program. And I started to talk about, because I'm not making enough money. And only thing I know to do, is a result back to, my grandmother saying, is not having is not an excuse for not getting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to talk about enrolling into this doctoral program, um, and what that was like for me, having a wife and kids, and going to school, back in school, working, all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff, and then writing and doing research on depression in African American men, and realizing in doing that research, um, the depression that I myself had experienced and what that was like.
Wow.
And so, um,
That's
and
the
that's,
key right there, brother.
I'm sorry.
That's the key right there.
Yeah, yeah,
Depression.
yeah, yeah. So I started to talk about how, I like the people that I was researching didn't understand that it was depression, because
Right.
it was so normalized, right?
Exactly.
That it masked itself in normal behavior,
Hmm.
right? And so
You don't even notice the depression.
right, because it's not called that. That
Hmm.
behavior that you're demonstrating is not called depression. It's called life,
Hmm. Failure.
right? It's called, chin up, nigga. You a man.
Get it
You deal
together.
right, deal with it. And so all of that gave me, more insight into who, not just who those people were, but who I was, and the things that I had struggled with myself. And so I just talk about all that stuff in this one pager, um, that I've written, and I'm making a couple edits to. But um, interesting enough, my former attorney, now book author, she said, I would just like you to add something, to that. And um, she said, I think it might be helpful if you could talk about what made you keep going. What what
Hmm.
what made you go to your professor and ask for help? What made you want to keep going? And in all those situations, why not quit? Why not bow out?
Right.
what was in you, that made you continue to, to keep
Right.
going. And the truth was, I never looked at it like that. I only looked at it as, um I, I I looked at it as not quitting.
Mm,
Not quitting was it. Not quitting was not an option.
right.
You know, failure wasn't an option for me.
Right.
So because I always, something I read that said that, the story, of the hunter, and the prey is never told by the prey. It's
Right.
always told by the hunter,
Hmm.
right? And so I understand that. I understood that nobody cares about the people that tried, right? That story is never told. The only story that's ever told is the person who conquered,
The one that perseveres until the end.
right? And so that was always my mentality. So I didn't look at it, at the time, as flunking out. I looked at it as a way, as an opportunity for me to find a way, another way to complete it. So maybe I didn't get it done that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you, you know, there's got to be another way,
Right.
and that was just that's always been my mentality.
That's a very interesting story, brother. I've heard this story a couple of times, but tonight you gave me more details than I've known before. But it also brings back to this conversation that we're having right now, a conversation between two black men. You are listening to Black Mental Health and Race with Dr. Moore and MF Doug AF. Um, One of the interesting things you said, brother, was how the things that you quit or the things that you flunk or fail at could be masking something very internal, but we never look at it like that. We look at it as, oh, this person did that to me. Oh, because this happened, this happened. We never look internal. And even tonight, although I've talked to you now for over 3 years of these podcasts that we've been doing, we I have failed to look at the internal. So I say to the audience, if you're looking at something and you know you have potential, but you can't seem to get it together, you may be in your 60s right now and you have committed to telling yourself, I am a failure. I ask you now during this conversation to examine fully what you are going through. But the biggest point that you made tonight, Dr. Moore, was we didn't know a word for depression as black men. We didn't know what it entailed. All we knew is that if you said you're depressed, you're weak. Get it together. That is the narrative that we tell ourselves. There's something wrong with you. And maybe there is, but you're never going to solve it until you look internally at what's going on. That is a very interesting story. Unfortunately, we have to move forward because we got a lot to recover in this year review. We are doing, every year, we do the status of the black man and woman, the year in review, how did we do last year. We have a report card, and we also have a theme for tonight, and that theme is uh, firearms, stress, and poverty.
Well,
It's
before we get
sure
into before we get into firearms stress and poverty,
right.
um, I'm just gonna go back for a second because when I looked at the notes from my old attorney, now book author,
Mm,
in her asking me what how did you keep going, right?
mm,
What made you keep going? Well, what I've later learned, you know, in my collegiate studies, particularly in my doctoral degree, is there's a psychologist. His name is Bandura, right? And
mm,
Bandura talked about something called self-efficacy,
mm,
right? And so, um, if it's a new word for anybody that potentially might be listening, research the word self-efficacy because
mm.
self-efficacy was not a word that I knew at the time, but
Right.
self-efficacy was something that I was manifesting, and
Exactly.
self-efficacy has everything to do with your belief in yourself in spite of your circumstances and your situation.
Mm. Yes,
And
sir.
so, at the end of the day, whatever you're going through, whatever you're experiencing, whatever your situation is, you have to be your biggest friend, your biggest supporter, your biggest fan. Because
Mm.
when you feel like you have nothing else, your friend will show up, your fan will show up, and that's you.
Mm. Wow.
And
That
that's
is
and that's what will push you and propel you.
very interesting. I think it ties right in with our title for tonight: firearms, stress, and poverty. When we're experiencing all of these failures, um, all of this frustration, that is highly stressful. I think that is the maybe one of the catalysts to depression, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Moore.
Are you asking
High
me?
high frustration, would that be one of the catalysts to depression?
It can be.
Mm,
It can be. It all depends on how you are going to deal with it,
right.
right? Um, for example, just being transparent. I resigned from a position today,
Mm, wow.
right? And um, a high paying position, um, but six figures, but
Mm,
it was not worth my stress and my mental
wow.
health. You can't pay me enough to have to deal with bullshit,
Mm,
right? And now that I understand my worth and I
mm,
understand my value,
mm.
you know, the one thing I know is that time is the one thing I can't get back.
Yes, sir.
So I can't allow you, you know, to stress me out days, months, hours, right?
Mm,
For six figures.
mm,
Because what I know is that I can take that time and I
mm.
can double those six figures,
And invest in yourself.
with less stress,
Mm,
with no stress, and using that same time.
mm.
And so I walked away from my own, mental health.
Wow. I didn't know that, bro. That's a shocker.
Yeah.
That's a
But
shocker.
I can tell you this:
Mm,
when I made the decision to write the letter, and when I walked in today and gave the guy my letter,
mm,
man, let me tell you something. The peace that brought me,
mm. Felt a big burden relief.
man, let me tell you something, bro. I felt so good. And here's the thing, bro. Here's the thing. Maybe um 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they called me and they said, you know what? You're doing such a great job. We're gonna give you a $10,000 bonus.
Get out of here.
I bullshit you not. We're gonna give you a $10,000 bonus.
Mm,
And I'm telling you, the next week and a half, they gave me $10,000 worth of bullshit to do.
mm.
I said, nah, you keep that. You keep your money.
Wow. That just changed the trajectory of my thought pattern. Wow.
Yeah. And
You never know what a person is going through.
yeah, you never know, you know. And so because I look, I feel like I've worked too hard to get
Mm,
to where I am, you
mm,
know, to go through bullshit at this point. You know, I mean, man, what I understand now about complacency and comfort, the psychological damage that can do to you, man. You
mm.
become so comfortable in certain situations that you allow yourself to go through so much bullshit because you're
Yes,
just
sir.
comfortable, right? And what I know about my life, my life has been constant change.
Mm,
My life has constant been growing.
mm,
And so when you start to put me in situations where I can't grow, you start to put me in situations that make me uncomfortable. It's time for me to leave. I was
mm.
telling my wife last night, I said, my wife is not Muslim,
Right.
but I was saying to her, I said, um, I'm going to share this piece with you because I was talking to her prior to me writing this letter of resignation. I
Mm,
said, you know, um, there's some books that we read called the Hadith, right?
mm.
We have the Quran, then we have the Hadith.
Right.
Hadiths are books that are written by people that have followed the Prophet,
Yes,
believe
sir.
Islam. And so in one of the Hadiths, it talks about the afterlife, right? And it says, in the afterlife, you're going to meet with Allah. And and Allah is going to be talking to you about what you did on this earth and
Mm,
X, Y, Z, and he'll be asking you, well, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that?
mm.
And you people will be responding by saying, well, I didn't have this, or I lived here in this area, or you know,
Right.
and giving all these different reasons why they didn't do X, Y, and Z. And Allah will respond by saying, did not make my earth spacious enough.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so I said, to her, to me, that always stays in my head, you know. And so what I understand about did not make my earth spacious enough is that this was all created,
Right.
for us,
Yep.
And so if you are gonna
Including the
stay
challenges and obstacles and all of
right,
that was
and
created
so
for.
if you're gonna stay in a job that's stressing you out, you're gonna stay in a situation that's stressing you out, and you are not going to take advantage of the earth that spacious enough and
Mm,
create opportunities for yourself,
mm.
it is to spite God and what He gave you.
Right. Right. Because it's not easy getting a damn graduate degree. If it were, we'd all be doing it.
Yep.
Well, I wish you the best, brother, in that endeavor because I know you're talented. I know you're strong. And I know that there are bigger opportunities out there for you.
Oh,
Inshallah.
bro, I got opportunities knocking at my door. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I'm sitting in another one already. So I mean,
Yes, sir.
you know, I'm looking at a position where I'm saying, wait a minute, you know, I hold well, I'm a black licensed therapist with a doctoral degree.
Hmm.
You know, I'm leave if I leave here, you know, and I'm looking at the demographic of the people that I work with,
Hmm.
go find another me.
Right.
Good luck.
Exactly.
Good luck.
Exactly. In fact, I told you your calling was in the social media, and I don't know how um, open you are to it, but your calling is in the social life and celebrity life. I don't know how that applies to you, but I know that you are very famous already, brother, and your work will help a lot of famous people. You're actually needed, and although the people don't see us as important right now in this conversation, eventually the people that actually take the time to listen are going to find you to be a valuable asset to have in their corner.
Yeah.
You are listening to Black Mental Health and Race. I am your host, MF Doug, and my co host is Dr. Moore. We were talking about the firearm stress and poverty, a year in review. Um, I wanted to talk about, speaking of celebrities, I wanted to talk about two more news um, relevant things. Fat Joe is one of them, and the other is Wendy Williams. Let's go with, but let me finish my point about the firearms. People in our community that are experiencing poverty are already under a lot of stress. Stress is a killer. And if you're experiencing poverty, but you're not the only one that is going to experience stress, from what you just said, you're a six-figure man and you're still experiencing stress. So it's not how much money you make, but coincidentally, our theme tonight was about poverty and stress. And the connection between those two, not for all, but just a small, minute speckle of the people in America that have the combination of poverty and stress, guess what is one of the most prevalent things that they begin to take on? They begin to solve their problems with firearms. Now, I know your experience in the underworld would have been more apt to this situation where we as black men, we are willing to take up firearms to do harm to ourselves, do harm to our communities, and just to try to cope with that stress in combination with poverty. Your thoughts, Dr. Moore?
Um, I I feel like I don't know if I think that I think that's an element of it.
Hmm.
I don't know that picking
Right,
up
because it
fire.
doesn't apply to everybody. Not everybody's impoverished, and not everybody's inclined to deal with firearms.
Right, and well, but there are. I mean, firearms is depending on where you are, you know, in the country. But firearms are very, um,
To access.
access to it, having it, it's a very normal, natural thing. I remember when, my son went off to college, the same college that I went to and his mom went to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the things that he talked about the most was how everybody on campus, had firearms. And I don't know that they had firearms
Wow.
because they were trying to cope with stress or anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's a hobby for some people, right? For a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
having a firearm as well as protection. Um, so I think people. I find that people more self medicate in situations like that than they
Mm-hmm.
do in terms of picking up firearms to destroy the community, so to speak. I don't think that um, you know we as black people, that's not something. I mean, we don't tend to go through stress and anxiety and then go shoot up a school,
Mm-hmm. Right.
right? We we
But
we
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 will
might,
shoot one another.
yeah. Well,
If
but
you look at the amount of killings in the black community by firearms, um, it's problematic.
well, I'm not arguing that, but I think that that's more to do with the alleged beefs and disagreements that we have,
Right.
misunderstandings that we have with one another, um, and going to firearms as a result of that. Not
Right.
necessarily, self medicating and picking
Right.
up a firearm.
But isn't it the whole? It's like living in the projects, which is another subject we have to touch on tonight in this year in review. Um, the fact that we're all pushed together in these tall buildings and all of us are facing this poverty in these projects, it's already enough stress to be explosive. But you add the element of a firearm, and you could terrorize your whole community.
Well, you can. It doesn't have to be a firearm, right?
Right,
Because before it's the firearm, you got to look at the drugs,
right,
and all those other things. You got to look at the
right.
poverty and all those other things. But more than anything else, I think um, what you probably want to look at and assess is it is a preparation to prison,
Exactly.
right?
It's a pipeline too.
Right,
It's
right,
the slide too.
right, right. Because it's you are already used to close proximities.
Hmm.
You are already used to, you know, uh,
Highly stressful situations.
highly stressful situation, anger, violence, all of drugs, alcohol,
Hmm.
dysfunction. You are already being prepped for that,
Hmm.
right? And so you're just gonna move from one house to another house. That's
Exactly.
similar.
The
That's
big
similar,
house.
right? That's similar to the house that you live in. You live in 1820 store, buildings where elevators and all that stuff doesn't work.
It's
People
the
doing drugs,
elevators.
people fighting, people, dysfunction, crime, prostitution, all that stuff is happening in your building.
Hmm.
You're seeing this every day,
Hmm.
you know. So it makes sense and prepares you, you know, for that next level of debauchery.
Exactly. Along those lines, there are two people that made it out of prison. One was Wayne Perry. He's in D.C. Have you ever heard of him?
Wayne Perry is not out of prison.
I think he's deceased, actually.
No, he's not. Wayne Perry is very much still alive.
Wow, I gotta look up the name again. Maybe I have the name wrong.
You talking
The
about
other
Ray?
person,
You talking about Rayful Edmond?
there you go. That's it. I'm sorry. Are you familiar with Rayful Edmonds?
I'm very familiar with Rayful Edmond.
Okay, the other person is in New York City. King Tut, are you familiar with him?
Not as familiar, but as I am with Rayful.
He's King Tut is the guy alleged to have robbed Tupac and been a part of that shootout in Quad Studios in um in Manhattan,
Mm.
which they blamed on Biggie and Puffy. But it's interesting that King Tut has been released from prison. Do you know that his term was 5 life sentences that the judge gave him? The same judge that adjudicated him to 5 life sentences in prison that he would never get out is the same person that released him. Now, conspiracy theory or not, what his own testimony, King Tut's own testimony was that given the extensive no future outlook that he had on life, he said that he began to see that if he kept thinking that way, the 5 life sentences would be his only reality. He said in order to do the time that he had to do with no prospect of ever getting out to see the light of day, he had to change his narrative. Now, I cannot vouch for him because they said that he did all types of bad things to people. But even him, which is what I'm talking to my audience about tonight, even him, he had to change his mindset. This man has got to be in his 60s now. He's got to be around our age, Dr. Moore. But even he had to change.
Don't rush me, bro. I'm not 60.
I'm only
No,
27, brother, but I
so
know you up there.
don't put no hour in this, bro.
We is French, brother.
Oh,
I'm only 27, brother, but I know a couple of people that may be that age.
God
But
bless.
it's interesting how a person, the very judge that sentenced him, seen a change in him so much so that he not only um, gave him a different sentencing, he released him. I mean, if you're looking for a reason to continue and not give up, talking to the audience, this is it. But you've got to change the way you think. We are particularly talking to black men, but this applies to everybody around the world. There is no, as long as you're alive, because we've been talking about funerals tonight too, as long as you are still alive, there's still a chance for you to change your reality. I think Dr. Moore just gave the best testimony of this. Now, Rayful Evans, I think he had a life sentence too. I'm not sure. But
for life. Yeah.
unfortunately, he was released, which should have never happened according to the people that he victimized. Same thing with King Tut. But he was released. There is
Well,
there is
r-
something that can be done, although you're saying to yourself, which I think we were talking about examining your own character. You have to be able to see the flaws in your character and want to change them. Now, Rayful Edmonds, I think, passed away 6 months after his release, but at least he had a chance to make a difference again. Your thoughts, Dr. Moore?
Well, Rayful was a snitch,
Mm,
and that's the reason why he um, allegedly was free.
mm,
Um, I don't look at Rayful in any way of any. I don't look at him in any way of positive character or admiration or anything like that.
mm,
Um, I, I think that he was a young, foolish guy. I know that, you know, um, growing up, in my neighborhood, with Rayful and Tony Lewis. Tony Lewis lived the next block over from me.
wow.
Um, right behind me. Um, and so that era was very, very close,
Mm,
to me. I'm very, familiar with
dynamic,
that. And
explosive.
yeah, very familiar with, very, very involved in that world at that time.
Yes, sir.
Um, so I I don't know that I have anything positive to say about Rayful, coming out, after um, snitching on people that he, sold drugs to.
Mm,
Um, I think in terms of character, he was a horrible person in terms of character.
mm,
Um, and I don't know if his release, I mean, I don't know the positive in that at all, except for him and the government. I
right.
don't know that it did anything for society. So,
Mm. I agree. The same thing with King Tut. Here's a man that tried to stop the life of somebody that we all um admire in Tupac. I don't think most people would forgive him. But if you're going to be dependent upon how people judge you, um, for instance, yourself in the story that you just gave tonight, there are a lot of people that may not forgive you. But if you're going to be dependent upon the way people judge you, or rather than becoming the biggest fan of yourself, it has some merit. It may not be everybody's cup of tea, but wanting to change your situation, you said you flunked out and you still went back.
man,
Most that would have killed most people right there. Not physically killed them, but it would have killed them mentally. Like, I'm never gonna try that shit again.
well, here's the thing, bro. Nothing beats a failure but a try, right?
That is correct, sir.
And if you are going to me, you not you,
Right.
but the biggest idiot in life is the person that says, "Oh, I failed at this. I'm never going to try this again."
Mm.
That's the biggest loser, the biggest idiot to me,
And that's
because
me.
that makes no sense. If you are a person that thinks that you are going to succeed at everything in life, you are the epitome of failure,
Well, I think somebody needs to hear that, including me.
because you're not. And no successful person is going to tell you that. The richest person in the world is going to tell you that they failed more than they succeeded.
Hmm.
That's how they learn.
You
And
know,
and
I
and
I told you, you told me that story a million times, but I never heard that detail before.
bro, as many ways you can look at life. You can look at life experiences,
Yes,
but
sir.
the 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 the, the thing that you learn the most about is from your failures.
Hmm.
But you can't see them as failures. You have to see them as opportunities for
Hmm.
growth.
And a lot of people are in such a condition or such a beat down, a mental beat down of themselves that they can't even fathom what you're saying. But it's actually true. And that is the reason why you and I do this podcast. I told you for the last 3 weeks I've been busy, 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 brother. And I usually try to make time for the podcast, but I was so overwhelmed that I really didn't have the opportunity. And but I'm glad that we got to speak tonight. I just checked the last episode. Instead of 13, we had 16 plays. So we don't do this for the popularity or to become famous. Although one day we should, from the hard work that we're putting in here, be famous or be relevant to somebody. We are always appreciative of any listeners that we have. We're always here to do this work, whether we get praise for it or not. I think Minister Farrakhan started out with just people in a house, 4 people that would listen to him in a house, but he could not stop believing in himself. And I think that's the theme that we're going to try to go through in this year in review. What was the most memorable thing that you remember from last year in public events?
Bro, I think um how you probably want to approach this year
Yes, sir.
and going forward. It's good to I guess look back and be reflective,
Hmm.
right? But you know, nothing creates opportunity like preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing creates luck but preparation. What I'm gonna say going forward is I, you know, not necessarily saying, well, saying or not necessarily saying, you know, I don't want to be cliches and talking about being opportunistic.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't feel any kind of way about walking away from that 6-figure salary because I already have another 6-figure salary. But I'm saying that to say that I'm going to double that salary that I left,
Hmm.
and I'm going to say that very confidently that I you have to be your biggest fan. You have to believe in yourself. And if you're not, then you are the reason. You're the person that's holding you back.
Mm. Wow. I'm trying to think of something that I remember from I guess one of the biggest things that happened publicly was the Diddy situation for me. I don't know why that comes to mind. Out of all of the positive things that happened last year, that would be the most significant. And Donald Trump getting reelected president, having a woman run for president as the main candidate of a major party, that was historical for me. Did you make any resolutions? I know you ain't big on resolutions, but did you
Uh,
give yourself a talk this year for the new year?
Bruh, let me
Happy New
tell
Year,
you.
by the way, and Happy New Year to the audience.
Indeed, Happy New Year. No, bro, I don't do resolutions. I do manifestations, bro.
Mm. Now there's a fucking vocabulary word. Something that most people will know what it is too. What are you going to manifest for the year? Um, we have a few little side topics, brother. This is a show about black mental health and race. Wendy Williams has a conservatorship. Um, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the legality of it, but I know that you are familiar with the reason someone would be put under conservatorship, especially when they're an adult, where people have to manage your money and control your movements. You're actually in a house that you cannot leave. Maybe your own house, but people have to start to control your behavior because they think your behavior is out of control. What do you think of Wendy Williams resurfacing? Have you heard of it? And she's been interviewed by the Breakfast Club yesterday, which I thought was shocking because according to the documentary, nobody knew where she was. Where is Wendy Williams is the name of the documentary. I know you don't get into celebrity stuff, and I don't either. Not the gossipy part of it, but I thought it was interesting from a mental health standpoint. Can you explain what the mental health side of a conservatorship is?
Well, I think you already explained it. I mean, it's really not that deep. It, it it is basically or essentially what you said. When you don't have the psychological faculties to make decisions for yourself, and someone else has to make those decisions for you.
Hmm.
So it appears, and I don't know Wendy Williams' situation, but it appears that she has went through some psychological challenges and needed someone um, to um, evaluate or um, make sure that um, she was making the best decisions for herself.
Hmm.
And it appears that she wasn't. So someone had to come in and um, make sure that her best interests were being taken care of.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
that's essentially what a conservatory does. Conservator, it's just another word for, like a guardian.
Right. Exactly. So I listened to the interview because I'm nosy, brother. I knew it had nothing to do with my life, so I shouldn't have been so interested. But I'm always interested in public figures, um, which is why Diddy came up in my most memorable um, things of public events that occurred last year. So they interviewed her, right, Dr. Moore? And brother, I mean, you can hear glimpse of sanity. However, the fact that she kept repeating herself without making a point, is that symptomatic of anything that you're familiar with in your DSM, or did I get the acronyms right? I always mess that up too.
DSM is correct, but I don't
Not
know
that
because
we're
I didn't.
diagnosing her, but when people start, because I have other people that I know that continuously repeat themselves, but they never make a point. But they think they're holding the whole conversation, and that you should understand what they're saying. What is that?
It sounds like a flight of ideas.
Wow. Can you explain that?
So, flight of ideas, a lot of times where a person may um, have a lot of different thoughts going on at one time,
Mm.
right? And so they're talking and they have all these different thoughts in their mind, but they can't separate them.
Wow. That would explain it. That makes a lot of sense, brother. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So let's say you come in for a psychological evaluation, right? And I
Mm.
might be examining your mood, right? Or your affect, right?
Mm.
And so I might be having a conversation with you and you might just be going on and you might be like, oh, yeah. And so, I talked to my dad and my dad was blah, 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 blah. And then, I went to the store and while I was at the store and then I got in my car and I drove. It's all of these different thoughts that are going on at one time,
But no
right?
completion.
Right. And it's just a constant flow of these ideas,
Mm.
of all these different thoughts at one time.
Wow. Well, in terms of Wendy Williams, we can only hope for the best. Is it possible that that type of condition, not Wendy Williams, we don't want to talk about her personal medical information, but is that type of condition reversible?
Um,
If so, under what circumstances?
that
I don't want to make you have to go through your medical books, brother, but I'm just interested in that type of mental health.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the person is probably not going to normally and naturally be able to change that. Probably going to only be able to do that through medication, and
Wow.
maybe after being medicated with the proper medication for a while, that person can kind of stabilize. But they're not
Mm.
going to just naturally be able to do that
Mm.
because what got them there wasn't natural, right? It probably was something that they were doing or taking that got them to that point,
Right.
right?
Which leads back to our theme tonight, being highly stressed and the way that we try to cope with it.
Right. And so if we're just talking about, not just talking, but we have to go back and look at. Uh, we don't have to go back into this, but for me, what it always a lot of things come back to Maslow's hierarchy of need,
Mm.
right? And so a lot of us, um, we never get to the top of what Maslow talked about with his hierarchy of need in terms of self actualization, right? Because what he talked about was at the bottom of that cycle is food, clothing, and shelter, right? And
Mm.
when you don't have food, clothing, and shelter, you know, it's hard for you to self actualize, right? And
Wow.
so you if you are engaging with a homeless person and this homeless person doesn't have on appropriate clothing, or this person is, hungry, or whatever, and you on the subway, you can't expect for this person to be able to meet you and in an intelligent manner, have an intelligent conversation with you, because his focus isn't there.
Mm.
His or her focus is on eating, is on, shelter, is on clothing. So their focus is somewhere completely different, right? So they're not going to be able to self-actualize. They're not going to
Mm.
be able to have that normal functioning conversation. They're going to do things that are going to look abnormal, right? And it's the same way if you're dealing with someone who is using drugs or hallucinogenics or whatever, they're not going to be able to, have a normal functioning conversation with you, right?
Mm.
Because they're not in that normal natural state. And it's only until these people can get to some balance in their life that they can have that type of conversation.
Wow. And I know of some people that are beyond poverty. They've overcome poverty, but they're still in this crisis mode because they have not learned to control that stress. And that is one of the biggest catalysts to mental health issues is being highly stressed, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Moore.
Well,
It ain't the only, but it's
if
it's
if you're highly stressed, um, that's that's going to cause a lot of problems for you,
hmm,
right? You you
functionally.
you're not going to be able to function normally if you're stressed out all the time.
Hmm,
Because you can't think clearly.
hmm,
You're gonna have a high level of anxiety. You're gonna have a high level of stress. You're not going to be able to make normal, natural, functioning decisions about yourself and about life.
hmm.
The the worst, some of the worst places that you could be in life in terms of making decisions is when you're stressed and you have a high level of anxiety or you feel desperate,
Hmm.
right? If you feel desperate, you're gonna do some strange things for some change.
Wow. Fascinating. Um, the reason I came up with the title for tonight was the firearms. Is some people think we can pray away the violence in the black community.
Good
Um,
luck with that.
some people think we can uh, hmm, will medicate our way through stopping the violence in the black community. What say you to
Well, I say that is you can pray, you can medicate,
that?
you can do all that you want.
What happened to your optimism, brother?
No, bro.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Let me tell you something.
Okay.
What I wanted to, because I was being facetious and giving you a rhetorical question that we all know the answer to. No preacher, no religion, no black unity, black empowerment is going to do anything to people that take up firearms. The level of violence that we see amongst black youth, but they're not the only ones committing violence. There was a story of a Guatemalan man from South America set a woman on fire and sat there and fanned the flames and then sat down in the subway and watched her burn. So on the news the other day, Dr. Moore, not necessarily on the news because they wouldn't show the violent part of it, but all throughout social media, you saw this person on fire, a woman on fire that had been set up on fire. So it's just not firearms. Firearms is just the release that you're looking for with the stress, but it could be other forms of violence. Now, not everybody takes to forms of violence because some people will use their art or positive things to try to reduce their stress levels. But anytime you change a person's quality of life, like you were saying, Dr. Moore, with the Maslow's theory, when you change that person's quality of life, even like a Diddy that is used to caviar and hotel rooms, jet planes, now his whole quality of life, without the probability of getting out anytime soon, his whole quality of life has just been removed, and that's got to be highly stressful. We don't know the type of Diddy person that we're going to get after this. We don't know what type of person we're going to get from Wendy Williams after this. We don't know too much of anything, but it is a part of our conversation with the public, with social media. Um, I just thought it was interesting to bring that up in our year in review, um, because we got a lot of things to look forward to, and we should be grateful that our quality of life has maintained, because it's so easy to slip and fall and never be able to get up again. Um, your feedback, and then we'll move on to Fat Joe before we end this conversation tonight, Dr. Moore.
Um, my feedback to what part of that? What part of that?
Being grateful for your quality of life.
Well, that's an understatement, bro. That's an understatement. I don't know that I have a lot to say about that. Quality of life is everything, bro. I don't care how
Yes,
much
sir.
money you have or your station in life. None of that means anything if if you don't have your health. So, quality of life is essential to the soul.
And essential to your mental health.
Uh,
Your mental health is not going to be stable if your quality of life isn't. And sometimes it's about perception, even when you have nothing. So if you're in poverty or impoverished, you can still have a quality of life, but you have to change your perception. That may be the first thing that you need to change in terms of self improvement. And I think that's why we come on to have these conversations every week. No matter what you're going through, you're going to have to examine yourself. You're going to have to love yourself enough to make the changes necessary. Fat Joe has been ridiculed now by portions of the black community, Dr. Moore, because he said that foundational black Americans are racist. Um, I guess he was calling them overzealous. Your thoughts?
I'm confused. Fat Joe has
He
been
was
accused.
on a interview with Math Hoffa, that barbershop shop talk type of interview, and they were asking him a series of questions, and a lot of black people's feedback from watching that interview was that he used the word nigger too much. He being identified as a Puerto Rican from the Bronx, and that not only was he using the nigger term too much, but he was critical of one of the black organizations that is supposedly held high in the minds of some black people. So Tariq Nasheed is one of the people that popularized the term, at least from what I know, of foundational black Americans, which is to hold a distinction from all other um, blacks in the Americas, particularly in the United States. We are not supposedly Jamaican, we're not supposedly Jewish or any other type of background other than the descendants of slaves. And the purpose of this, according to Tariq Nasheed and those who follow that ilk, is that if we are to get reparations, we want to be able to distinguish ourselves from people that just come here from Africa, from the Europe or any other places that who happen to actually be black, but they haven't had the same experiences as us. Are you following me so far? And do you think this distinction is important? Being foundational Black Americans.
Foundational Black Americans.
Yes, sir. Because I want to get to the point where we think critically, not just about what Fat Joe said, but about the state of the Black Union and our unity. Good luck with that. But our ability to think for ourselves. What do you think about having a distinction that gives us the qualifications for reparations for 400 years of slavery that would exclude other uh, people who happen to be Black, who happen to reside in America now, United States, but they should be excluded from reparations because they don't have that 400-year descendancy and legacy of slavery?
Uh, the
I guess
longest.
it's a question of who deserves reparation in the United States that was Black, to make it more clear of a question than an opinion.
Uh, the long and short answer to that
Come
for
on,
me.
Dr. Paul.
The long and short answer to that for me is very simple. All right, I'm not gonna make this long. Okay. My answer to that is nigga, please.
Explain, expound, sir, because a lot of people get caught up in this bullshit, and we could deal with Fat Joe on another level, but
Man, Fat Joe is as much of a nigga
let's talk
as
about the credibility, and then we'll get to him. Let's talk about the credibility of foundational Black Americans and their distinguishing themselves from anybody else.
but how are you doing that?
According to them, you just need to say the word. It's like the episode of South Park, where if you said the name P. Diddy in the mirror 3 times, he was going to murder you. So
But that
if
doesn't
you
make
say
sense to
you're a
me.
foundational Black American and you can
Man,
prove it,
that's new nigga talk to me. I don't
say that again, brother, because I think a lot of people need to hear it. They're not going to be happy with it. But new nigga talk is a term that we're going to phrase this. I thank you because I didn't know what to call it, but that is exactly what it is, brother. How are you distinguishing yourself from any other Black? As if, because let's take it from a historical context. You're saying that you deserve reparations, but no other Black people in America do because they didn't have a legacy of slavery. But slavery happened all over the world, from Europe to Africa, parts of Asia, parts of South America, Australia. The tyranny of Europeans against Black people didn't just happen in America. If you take it from that standpoint alone, the fact that you were talking to this new nigga shit about you being distinguishable as a descendant of a slave shows that you really don't know nothing about history. You really don't know nothing about who you are, what you are, and where you belong in this world. We still don't grasp the concept of unity, that we are willing to be divided along the lines of Puerto Rican, the lines of foundational Blacks, along the lines of intelligentsia, academics. These people are different. That none of that matters if you get pulled over by the cops. If you look a certain way and you get pulled over by the cops, he's not gonna give a damn if you're uh, a Muslim, if you're a Democrat, if you're taken from borrowing from your field, if you're a PhD. None of that matters in terms of who you are. And until we get that down back, I think we have a lot to learn. But I'll let you have the last word on that before we move on to another subject.
Well, I feel like
We want to talk
um
about Fat Joe too, remind me.
okay. Well, I don't have a lot to say about that. I feel like this though, but if you are having a conversation with someone that is calling themselves foundational black, and they're trying to make a distinction between them and some other niggas, uh, I feel like, you know, when you realize that you're talking to an idiot and you continue the conversation after you have acknowledged that this person is an idiot, then you are a bigger idiot to continue that conversation.
Hmm.
So I'm not going to entertain a conversation with someone who's using terminology like foundational black, because some people like to, try to sound intelligent,
Hmm.
try to talk smart.
Hmm.
Um, but it's easy to sound intelligent to a fool. Because
Hmm.
if you said some shit to me like, I'm a foundational black, you that's probably the beginning and ending of our conversation.
Hmm. Poverty of the mind, brother. That's another form of poverty. You are so delusional that you don't even think properly about what you're saying.
Well, you're trying to intellectualize something. You're trying to sound smart by, coming up with these new phrases. You know, foundational black. What the?
And the other one is ADOS, African descendants of slavery. Those two.
Man, look, all y'all niggas. You call yourself what you want to call yourself. All y'all niggas.
As my boy used to say, because I used to have these Black Power debates with him every day. Not even debates, arguments. We just get into an argument every day because he was on the side. But out of all of the things that I could say to him, at the end of the conversation, even if I won the argument, he would tell me one thing. He said, Doug, I'm going to tell you one thing. I said, what? He said, all niggas must wait. And no matter how much I would try to school him, I couldn't even refute the argument that other people in the world that are in charge of the system, and these systems are all over, they're very much European and they have no empathy for anybody else. And rightfully so. I think what you said tonight is you have to love yourself first. So we could talk about racism, we could talk about race, but people are being themselves. It's only us as this so-called African American, when we're neither African or American, we seem to think that we can somehow belong to something that excludes us from all other tyranny in the world. And we could do it by virtue of just declaring, "Oh, I'm this, I'm that." It's like the Moors that say that you see these and it's interesting. Mark Zuckerberg just did an interview, and he's the owner of Meta, which is the owner of Facebook, and they came to the conclusion that misleading information or false information should be allowed to stay on Facebook because it's their First Amendment right to be a fool. So even if somebody is on there touting that I'm a Moor and I don't have to, I will never be arrested for driving without a license because I'm not driving, I'm traveling. That Facebook has said that we have to allow that information to be disseminated, even though it's absolutely false. That is what we're going to have to deal with in terms of Black people and unity. Whenever somebody else is just saying this new nigga shit or this old nigga shit without any basis in science or fact or context of history, we are going to be fighting ignorance for the rest of our life. There's a poverty of the mind in terms of our mindset as a people that needs to change. And that is my year in review. But quickly, let's talk about Fat Joe, my brother. Any feedback before I start with Fat Joe?
Well, I think listen to what you have said. I don't know, the thought that comes to my head with Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk
Hmm.
and all that stuff in terms of information being disseminated without being fact checked. Um, I think you get what you deserve,
Hmm. That's exactly right.
and I feel like um, if the stint or the growth of your knowledge is algorithm research,
Hmm.
then I, I blame you for that because
Hmm.
you don't know any better
Hmm.
than to Google research something or to um to social media research something.
Hmm.
If that's the extent of what you are going to do in terms of what you know, then you know I'm not mad at them for saying, you know what, this is my platform. I'm going to do what I want to do with it,
Hmm.
and you know, we're not fact checking on here. Everybody gets to say what they want to say.
Hmm.
I blame the so-called researcher, you know, for their lack of knowledge and lack of experience of being able to research
Hmm.
because you are now holding someone else accountable for what you should know or for what you
Exactly.
should research. So everything that you, if that's the case, then every time you open your mouth, you should say, well, according to Elon Musk,
Hmm.
or according to Michael Zuckerberg,
Hmm.
this is what they said. Because you ain't done no research yourself,
Right.
and all you're doing is going to a social media platform and getting your information, and then coming back acting like you're a scholar. It's almost
Hmm.
like it's almost like when I was upset with all the people that went to see Spike Lee's movie of Malcolm X
Hmm.
and came out of that movie theater feeling like they were Malcolm X scholars, according to Spike Lee.
And according to him, they were.
Right. And then want to have an intelligent conversation about Malcolm X based on Spike Lee.
Hmm. Never been in the nation. Never been to a Malcolm X rally.
Never read a book.
Hmm. but they're gonna tell you who did this and who did that. Brother, we got a lot of work to do. We is French, and I don't want to include you in that because you're not wasting your time, and I don't blame you. But my declaration was to as a poor righteous teacher, is to teach the uncivilized. Fat Joe using the word nigga. This is an old argument, people that are listening to us. Um, Nobody, I think, uses the word nigga more fluently than black people themselves. It's amazing how you can get upset at Fat Joe. And I'm not letting him off the hook for anything. We can tear into his Puerto Rican behind quickly. But it's amazing to me that we can use the word, despite the connotation, despite the meaning that it has had historically, so fluently, but then expect for others not to use it. Fat Joe grew up in a black community, or at least a black community adjacent. He's familiar with the hood, in other words. We use the word nigga uh, because he looks more European or Caucasian. It sets up an interesting problem, but it's a problem that we've created for ourselves. And you can solve it any way you want. You can distinguish yourself from niggerdom, or you can do whatever you like. But I assure you that if you put the same energy into getting a degree in some science, or some type of trade, if you put that same energy into the energy that you would put into a frivolous argument about who can use the word nigger when you use it so fluently, I think that you could come out of the poverty of mind that you're in. Your thoughts, Dr. Moore? Fat Joe.
Well, there's a saying. Maybe I heard it from my grandma first.
Yes, sir.
Um, but I don't know that she's the author of it. But it's one thing she would say. There's one thing for people to look at you and think you're a fool. Then you open your mouth and remove all doubt.
Amen to that, brother. Amen.
Uh, so I'm not going to argue with anyone about Fat Joe using the word nigger, being a nigger. Because Fat Joe considers himself a nigger,
Hmm.
and so anybody wanted to argue or wanted to make an argument about Fat Joe being a nigger, using the word nigger, that nigga ain't got shit going on in his motherfucking life. Because if they got time to sit around and argue or think about Fat Joe being a nigga or saying the word nigga, that nigga is got some problems. They damn self.
You need to handle that.
Bruh, I that is one of the biggest waste of time arguments ever.
Hmm.
You know, this dude. So what? He light skinned. So what? He whatever he is, Latino, Hispanic, Puerto Rican. Puerto Ricans is niggas.
Hmm.
They're just Puerto Rican niggas.
Exactly.
So what? I mean, you want to be what? You want to be more niggerish than him?
Hmm.
That shit makes no sense to me. This dude is the epitome of the black community.
Hmm.
He's epitome of the black community.
Hmm.
You know, he just happens to share his ethnicity with another group of people.
Mm-hmm.
But to try to argue a sense of argument whether or not he's nigger enough, he's black enough. I mean, it's the same dumb argument about whether or not Barack Obama is black enough.
Hmm.
Listen,
Or
shit like,
Kamala Harris.
bruh,
Kamala.
conversations like that are a waste of time, man.
Big
It's
waste of
foolish.
time.
It's just foolishness to me. I don't entertain foolishness like that, bro.
Yes, sir. Um, on a somber note, you and I are both attached to Cheraw, South Carolina, brother. There was a funeral for Officer Dwight Thais Marshall. Uh, he was in a fatal car accident. He was part of law enforcement. I don't know if he was law enforcement in Cheraw or he was from Cheraw, but I have a connection to him through um, my in-laws, and I just wanted to let everybody know that he was a young man. I think he was 20 something years old, and he lost his life. I think the last podcast we did for 2024, brother, I was um, making the point that we all have to be very careful when we go on out or coming into our houses. From the lady that was set on fire in a train station to people like this, we never know how precious life is until it's gone. So we better treasure it while we can. Rest in peace, Dwight Tyrese Marshall.
R.I.P.
Indeed. Did you have anything on your mind, Dr. Moore, as we wrap this up?
No, man. I think we touched on a number of topics. I didn't know that we were even going to go as long as we've gone.
Right.
So I think we've covered um, a lot of things. But I don't know. I think in closing, I shared a
Oh,
couple of
that's the
different.
other thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Moore.
Mhm.
But there's a new terror attack in New Orleans. A black guy takes his vehicle and just runs into people and shot a bunch of people. Are you familiar with that story?
Well, I don't know that he shot anybody. I think he just ran over
No,
people with his car.
like the other dude, I forgot what state he was from, Wisconsin or something like that. But he was a black dude also that
Yeah. Well,
used his
I,
motor
I don't
vehicle.
I don't know if he. Well, see that again. We're gonna go back to the conversation about whether or not he was black or not. Because this guy looked, he was black in color or of color, but I don't
Right.
know that he was. I don't know that he identified as African American.
Gotcha.
Um, because he looked like he could be, um, Aramaic,
Right.
Arabic or, something. And I know he had a Muslim name. So,
Well, now they're
um,
saying that he's a Nation of Islam. And so,
mm,
oh boy, here we go.
yeah. So I don't know. So I don't know about his ethnicity, or whatever. And I don't know that that matters. Um, but loss of life is problematic, you know, and heartbreaking, at the same time.
Indeed. As we just discussed, life is very precious. then you have to be careful. But no matter how careful you are, the randomness of life and death, the unstoppable, unpredictable nature of life and death shows that we need to be thankful for the life that we have and respectful of the lives that are lost.
Well, I
Rest in
think
peace.
I think in addition to um, being respectful of life and all the rest of that stuff, I and being appreciative of life is I think we also have to make sure that we're being intentional about life, right? Because I mean, you can spend 5, 10 years of life just wasting it or taking it for granted,
Hmm.
right? And the thing about it, if
Arguing
you
about who should be niggas.
and that foolishness too, thinking that you're doing something of value, when you're really just wasting time. You
Teach
get
them.
you're gonna get nothing from a conversation, an argument, or debate from that. And if you spend a day, 24 hours, it's not a day or 24 hours that you're ever gonna get back in life, right?
Hmm.
And so if you're not intentional and purposeful about your life, you're going to get what you put into it,
Hmm.
right? And that's why I'm saying 5, 10 years will pass you by like nothing if you
Hmm.
are not. What in what you were just saying about life, if you're not intentional and purposeful about life, it is going to miss you.
Hmm.
It is going to miss you because you aren't doing shit to manifest it. You
Hmm.
aren't doing shit to live in the moment of it.
Hmm.
When I look at my life, I always look at my life 5 to 10 years ahead of time.
Wow. Got to make a mental note of that.
I always in my head think about, okay, what does 5 to 10 years look like for me, and
Hmm.
what do I need to be doing right now so that 5 to 10 years will look different. I've always looked at life like that.
And some people don't give it a second thought.
Well, and look at them and look at their life,
Hmm.
and that's why life is happening to them instead of happening for them.
Amen. Amen, brother. All right, brother. You've got all of the tools and all of the subjects. Can you knit us into the perfect storm to get out of here?
I
Take us
wish I,
home, brother.
I wish I could. I wish I could, because if that would be the case, then I can answer all your prayers, and all black folks could get along and be happy.
And give us the lotto numbers,
Yeah,
the Powerball.
yeah. But it don't work like that.
Hmm.
Everybody wants the finished product, but
Hmm.
but everybody wants the finished product, but nobody wants to do the work to get there.
Hmm. Wow. Um, I'll say this in closing. We, remind me, we got to talk about Washington after we close. Washington Commanders. Congratulations, brother. You you
Don't don't
finally
talk
did it.
don't talk about it when we close. Talk about it now.
You're like the rest of
Yeah,
us.
yeah. You don't want to put this on the air. You want to wait till we get off the
Oh
air to talk about
no, we definitely gonna
Michael
put it on the
Manning.
air. We
Okay,
definitely airing it out, brother.
okay. You
Airing
said,
it out.
okay, well, let's
I
talk
just
about it.
wanted to get past the serious subjects before
Okay, okay. Well, this is
we
a
go
serious
into.
matter. This is a serious matter, bro. And
Yes, sir.
you talk about my commanders. This is a serious matter. It's a
A
serious issue.
very serious.
Absolutely.
This is not frivolity. This is real.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to say that no matter what your financial condition, the poverty of the mind affects us all. And your ability to think your way out of situations, your ability to think highly of yourself and positive is all in the conversation. Tonight, you have heard a conversation between two black men, candid, serious, yet lighthearted. And we hope that you come back next week and for the rest of the year to hear a conversation. At least once a month, we'll try to come back. We try to do more shows than that, but it all depends on what we're doing in our active life and how we're trying to manage through the day. We wish you all a very healthy and prosperous new year. It's just begun. Make it the best that you can. Now, before we close, brother, let's talk about them commanders. Now, here's the problem with the commanders.
Bro, there's no problem. First of all, you starting off wrong.
If
You
you
starting
come
off
in,
wrong.
bro, listen up, brother.
So I'm like, bro, you starting off wrong. So I'm like, bro. There's no problem
Let me
with the
stop you
Commanders.
right there, bro.
There's no problem. There's only problems with the Cowboys and the Giants or whatever other team that you want.
Now,
You
don't
want
don't mess around and
it.
get messed up by what it is. What who are they? Uh, Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
We already beat them, bro.
Oh, okay.
We
I'm
already
looking at
we're
the brackets.
Yeah. Look at the
I ain't
bracket.
had a chance to see the
You
games.
obviously you didn't because we already beat them in the first round of the playoffs where
You
people
damn
had,
sure did.
yeah,
Now that I look at it,
absolutely, where people
who
had us
y'all
down.
play next?
We play Detroit tomorrow.
Oh boy. Now wait a goddamn minute. You
Uh,
think
well, be like all the other
detractors?
naysayers. Yeah, naysayers, detractors. You know that has been hating on us for the last 6, 8 games of the season where we've won
Hmm.
consecutively back to back
Hmm.
games. So if you want to jump on that bandwagon, jump on it. You know,
I will text you tomorrow,
you
brother.
can text me, take a picture. I don't give up.
Now, brother.
Do what? Cause
We were
look, bro,
just talking about unity.
look, we got some goddamn unity. You better jump on this bandwagon. You want some damn unity.
Uh,
Because here's
you know what I'm
here,
happy of? And I told you I'm no longer a Dallas Cowboys fan. They didn't even come close this year.
bro, y'all, they are garbage.
They are sorry.
Garbage.
Hmm. But now, let me tell you something, brother. I think if you beat Detroit, you got an even higher task because playing against the Philadelphia Eagles, them birds got something for y'all.
Bro, we already beat them.
Don't you got
Yeah,
to meet them again?
but we play them twice a year.
Right.
Right. So we already beat them. They beat us once. We beat them once. But here's the thing at the end of the day.
Yes, sir. I
For,
want to
for,
hear this. I
for,
want this on tape.
no, you're going to get it on tape. At this
Your
point,
prediction, sir.
at this point, we are playing with house money. We're playing with house money.
You got me on that. Yes, sir.
Because for one, bro, nobody predicted us to be nowhere,
In the
anywhere.
damn playoffs.
Right.
Playoffs? You want to talk about playoffs? Are
So
you kidding me?
we're already look, bro. Last year we were 4-12, 4-13, whatever. Bro,
Shameful, brother.
Now we got over 12 wins.
Hmm.
So at this point, bro, we are killing the game.
Yes, sir. I
We're,
can't
we're,
talk. I gotta
we're,
keep my mouth shut.
right, we're killing the game. So it doesn't really matter to me at this point because nobody had us doing what we have done,
Hmm.
and we are doing it
Hmm.
with a rookie, with a rookie
Hmm.
quarterback, with a rookie quarterback,
Yes, sir.
and a first year coach.
These are all facts, brother.
For the Commanders. So I mean, we're doing. I mean, we have a whole new squad. We've cleaned the house,
Hmm.
and we're working from the bottom up. So, bro, at this point, bro, it's up.
I will say this. You've accomplished so much in less than a year that whatever happens, I am can say out of my mouth that I am proud of the Washington Commanders.
Hey, bro, you gotta be, bro.
I got to give credit where credit is due, brother.
You gotta be, bro.
I cannot mess with Jaden Daniels and the accomplishments of the Washington Commanders. Bravo. Bravo.
Thank you, bro.
Keep up the good work. I wish you the best.
Thank you. And when we talk again, after we beat these damn Detroit
Oh, I ain't
Lions.
gonna let you live it down. Y'all
Oh,
better not lose.
well, look. I
That's
mean,
why I'm giving you credit now.
well, bro. We are. I mean, we're the underdog in the fight.
Yes,
So
sir.
you know,
Yes, sir.
but it's all good because we've been counting all season.
That's
So
right.
ain't no
That's right.
thing.
That
So
is
if
correct.
right, so if we do what we supposed to do and win, bro, 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 let me tell you something. I might just come on this podcast and talk nothing but Commanders for like an hour straight.
And I'm gonna let you go, brother. I'll sit back and drink a cold one. Let them have it.
Bruh, if we
You let
mess
them
around,
have it, so I'll let
bruh,
them have it.
if we mess around and beat Detroit, I told the bros, I told the fellas at the gym, I said, let me tell you something. If we mess around and win, because I wear uh, 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 my fraternity paraphernalia in the
Yes,
gym
sir.
every day. I said, man, if we mess around and win, I'm gonna mess around changing my paraphernalia. I said, I'm gonna fuck around and go, you
Maroon and
know,
gold.
bro, I'm gonna go and buy nothing but, you know, paraphernalia, commanders paraphernalia
Yes,
to
sir.
wear to the gym, for the rest of the year.
And deservingly so, sir.
Hey, bro, let me tell you. So, it's all, hey, bro, look, nobody had us doing what we done,
Hmm.
and we've done it convincingly every
Yes,
week.
sir. That's right. And with something that has been untested.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, we shall see, brother. We will see.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there were a lot of subjects that we missed. But in the light of all of the seriousness, in the light of all of the mental health issues, we are gladly going to end this podcast for this week. The first podcast of the year, 2025, season 5, episode 1, on this high vibrational note. And we wish every team out there much success.
Yeah,
Assalamu alaikum.
Malik Salam. And we're claiming victory and success
I'm gonna have to cut
uh,
you, Mike, brother.
going forward, not only for the commanders, but for you and I and all the listening folks.
Assalamu alaikum.
Peace to the God.
Peace to the universe. Call you back.
Yep.